Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawks fans, welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. We have reached about, day 4 of training camp. Yesterday, they didn't practice. Saturday, we're recording on Sunday. Here to talk Seahawks training camp. We've got a few things to update from our last show. We're going to do that. We're going to highlight a few players that are standing out, and we're going to see what we're looking for in the second week of practices. Hey, Keith, how you doing?
Doing good. It's through 3 practices. They've had the first day off. There's already some storylines to talk about. So let's just jump right into them.
Yeah, well, I was going to hit the salary cap first. I thought that was interesting. We knew what, how the restructures went and impacted the salary cap and the Uchenna Nwasu extension. And right now the Seahawks have $16 million and change in the salary cap. That's after Witherspoon came in, and his contract was added into that as well. So Seahawks are actually in pretty good shape right now. That's 11th most in the league, and gives them some opportunity for some flexibility for some deals potentially as training camp proceeds, as the regular season comes into focus, and then all the way through to the trade deadline. If they feel like they're lacking in any position group, they can go out and kind of acquire as necessary. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. That is the flexibility that they have. And the nice thing is that, some of it is acquiring cap room now and using up next year's cap in order to have it available this year. But the way the cap rollover works, it doesn't matter, right?
And it's going up.
Yeah. If they don't use it, then it just rolls over into next year anyway. So it ends up just kind of working out.
I haven't checked lately where the cap is projected to be in 2024, but I would imagine it will probably increase double what the increase was this year. I think it went up $10 million as it has for the last 10 or 12 years. I would imagine it might go up $20 million next year, only because of the media agreements that will be entered and in play by the 2024 season. And so the money's going to be there. There's enough players under contract too. I think the Seahawks are plus $100 million in salary cap right now. Obviously, that's not going to stay the same by the time we get, into free agency next year. We could have anywhere between $40 and $60 million to play with. At least that's where it stands right now.
Which is true. Hopefully within that, there's also more than 30 players on the roster, because that was the problem going into this. The problem with this year is that, it looked like they had a lot of cap room, but they had very few players on the roster. So there was a lot of money that had to be spent just to fill our roster out.
And again, hats off to John Schneider and company, because they mastered that masterfully. I thought that they did a great job, especially with the Geno contract. It just kind of laid the foundation for everything else that followed. Mm-hmm. And we were able to sign Dre Jones. And then, enough pieces to where we're really not lacking in any one spot on the roster. Maybe save the defensive tackle spot, but we'll get to that in a little bit. We'll talk about that spot. I wanted to start with the offense, Keith, and I just wanted to talk about a couple of outstanding standout type plays and players that we've seen so far in camp, and kind of what that means for the roster. I want to start with D. Eskridge, because by all accounts, he's having one of the best camps, along with Michael Jackson on the defense, of anybody in camp. And if he stays healthy, and has stayed healthy all through the offseason by all reports, and through the first 3 days of camp, what impact would that have on this roster?
That would be huge. He's just a weapon, right? He's a guy that can run those jet sweeps. He can get the ball in space and do crazy things with it. He can also change direction so much faster than most human beings, that he's able to create space and get open very quickly when necessary. And to add him in to the trio above him with it, just Jaxon-Smith and Jigma and Lockett Metcalf. Now you're talking about there's only one football. How do you get it to all these guys? That becomes the problem that you have when you've got four guys that are playing at that high of a level. So um, there's nothing bad that can happen from Eskridge staying healthy and returning to the form that caused the Seahawks to draft him in the second round.
You mentioned the four wide receivers at the top of the room, but that's just really the tip of the iceberg. You've got Derek Young that can impact the roster. I understand Cade Johnson's having a heck of a camp, along with Matt Landers. And then you've got the tight end room. We all know about Noah Fant and company. And then you look at the running backs. We've improved there. We've got Charbonnet. McIntosh, I guess, is having a great camp so far, showing what he can do, especially receiving out of the backfield. Man, this is just like the best case scenario, I think, for this offense so far. Speaking of Jaxon-Smith and Jigba, well, I want to say Eskridge too. He showed up all 3 days. Like, he's had impact plays all 3 days, really showing up. Hats off to D. Eskridge. I know it's a tough deal where you've got an entire fan base and all of the media really not against you per se, but serious doubts about you. And to be able to work in the offseason, come in and perform and be ready for camp, hats off to him.
Yeah.
So, and Jigba, Keith, let's talk about this kid. It's like one of those deals where you feel like you're on a little bit of a hype train when you talk about him, but the hype is real. He's backing it up.
Yeah. And that's what you kind of expect from a guy that's the 20th overall pick and the first wide receiver taken in a draft, right? You expect a guy to come in and show some readiness, some ability to come in and be a playmaker right away.
Well, yes and no, because he was drafted in the first round, but he fell all the way to 20. No other wide receivers were taken before him. He's the first guy to come off the board. He had that junior season that was completely washed out at Ohio State, but his sophomore year was so huge and showed so much potential. And then he capped it off with that Rose Bowl performance. And that's why he was sitting there. But this guy, by all accounts, could have gone top 10. John Schneider says as much as well. And to have that come out and show that is super exciting, because we haven't had a third wide receiver that we could depend on year in, year out, like consistently for, I don't know how long, Keith, like 4, 5, 6 seasons?
Yeah, it's been a while since Doug Baldwin retired.
It seems like since Doug Baldwin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And we say that about Baldwin, but Baldwin was mostly, he wasn't a third guy. He was, he played in the way up. He played in the slot, but he was more than a third receiver. Although I did see some comments this week about people getting a lot of Doug Baldwin vibes from Jaxon-Smith and Jigba, just in the way that he works and his ability to get open in small space and that kind of stuff. And
crafty,
I mean, that's yeah. But of course, he's got more speed than Baldwin did. Not that Baldwin was slow, but I mean, that's just
well, that's the thing.
Jason's
he's able
talent.
to get open, and win in the middle, but also he's able to get downfield for you. He's already shown that in some clips that we've seen in practice. And talk about, when you've got 3 receivers that can do the same things, that's when things get special. And that's where we're at, I think, with this guy. So I want to talk about Cade Johnson a little bit. And the reason that I do, not because I think he's going to make the roster at this point or whatever, but just because he's standing out so far. The spot behind Derek Young, and it looks like maybe, with what Eskridge is doing so far, maybe he's ahead of Derek Young right now for that 4th spot. But now we're starting to talk about getting into the weeds a little bit with the furthest depth players on the roster at wide receiver. The wide receiver is going to probably absolutely carry 5, but there could be an opportunity there for the team to carry 6. So we're talking about competition at the 5th and 6th spot on the roster. But Cade Johnson seems to be standing out so far. He's put in the work. He's come in. He's improved. He's leading the pack right now as the in that 5th, 6th conversation out of this group, and includes Landers and some of the other players that would be kind of practice squad level guys. Cade Johnson, and that's good news for Cade. He came on last year. He had some punt return opportunities, kick return. That could be another spot where he could kind of fill in on the roster is special teams.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that I was kind of excited about. When he came out, he was an undrafted free agent. I thought would get drafted. So when Seattle signed him after the draft, I was pretty excited about it. He just has never been able to stick. He's always been close to making the roster. He's been like, it's a 53-man roster. He was like the 56th guy in camp. And so for him to come out and actually, as the roster has gotten better, for him to continue to step forward, it's starting to make it look like he is a guy that could earn a spot there. I think he's got an uphill battle because I still think that he's behind, the four we've talked about, Jarick Young, and he's got to hold off Matt Landers, who maybe
and Bobo.
Yeah, and Bobo had a good summer, but I haven't heard much of anything about him since camp started. And whereas Matt Landers had a good summer and he's had a good camp for a couple of days, and he's just uniquely physical, right? He's just got physical traits that Cade Johnson can't match, but still, it's been a kind of a fun story. He's a guy that's hung around. He's continued to put in the work. He's not gotten opportunities, but that hasn't prevented him from continuing to grind. So we've seen plenty of guys that grind has paid off for them. Mike Jackson on the other side.
On this roster.
Yeah. Mike Jackson spent 4 years on practice squads before finally getting his chance, and showed up in a big way last year.
And now he's fighting so hard he doesn't want to give it up. He's one of the players I want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball for sure.
Yeah. So the Seahawks love guys like that, and honestly, I love stories like that. The guys that put in the work, that do the grinding, that nothing's ever given to them, and they don't care. They just continue to do their thing. Teams can never have enough guys like that.
So last player I want to talk about on the offensive side, there's obvious players too, like Metcalf's winning some battles against, the defense. Obviously Tyler Lockett is having success. Smith is throwing the ball like crazy. I think we just need to devote an entire show to Geno Smith though. I mean, these things are kind of almost now a given. So you just don't want to talk about them because we already know that. Let's talk about some of the other guys, but nonetheless, Kenny McIntosh. I just want to mention Kenny McIntosh because he seems like he's standing out right now, kind of separating himself, maybe even a little bit from DJ Dallas. Now, Dallas is a consummate pro. He's coming in. He's working hard. He's there. Again, a guy that you expect to do certain things in camp, and he's doing those things. McIntosh is new. We didn't know. He was an unknown quantity, for most fans. Comes in, didn't athletically test well, dropped in the draft all the way to the 7th round, comes in with a chip on his shoulder, and something to prove. And sure enough, the guy's showing burst and speed and quickness. Some of those things don't show up in some of the athletic testing as far as long speed, in the 40 and whatnot. So that athleticism, that burst, that quickness, shiftiness, and so forth is showing up in camp. And I just wanted to mention that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming in. He's fighting for a roster spot. I think he's got an inside track and almost guaranteed to make one. But he's basically an upgrade over Travis Homer, athletically.
I think
and everything. And Homer stuck around his entire rookie career, and
landed a second contract.
Yeah,
with another team.
Did some good things and got himself another deal. And I think that McIntosh is an upgrade there in that same kind of role, same kind of body.
Remember how Homer came in initially, Keith, and just was not impressive. He was the guy that was supposed to have a little bit of that shiftiness, that burst, that speed, and so forth. When he came in, I didn't think he had anything like that. He didn't show that in camp, and he made the roster only because he was kind of a back end of the draft pick, and I thought maybe he was given the benefit of the doubt there. And it took him nearly 3 years to kind of figure it out.
Yeah. Well, yes. He made the roster his rookie year, which I was a little surprised at.
Me too.
But the team found ways to use him, and he kept him on the roster. And then he did kind of grow and become a better player as he continued to be in the system. I just think that the way Kenny McIntosh looks is that basically he's going to step in where Homer was at the end,
Yes,
and
right
then
out of the
grow
gate.
from there. Um, and that's promising. It's really promising. Um, and so I think that's going to be good. I think we should, before we leave the offense, we should talk about the offensive line a little bit, because just as an update, well,
Sure, go for it, man.
our last show we talked about, it was so telling that Oluwatimi was already getting reps with the ones, and if he got reps with the ones again on day 3, that the job was his, like that, because it's the thing. They didn't. Evan Brown went back in on day 3. Oluwatimi is going to be back in here on day 4 today, as the starter. So they are continuing to rotate it. I will say though that you listen to Geno-Smith and some of the quotes he's had. I think it's Oluwatimi's job. He talks about how this kid's 23. He comes in, but he's a vet. He already knows all the line calls. He knows all the protection calls. He can come in and point out to other people, hey, this is what we're going to do. This is what they are going to do, the defensive line, and knows that stuff. That's why they drafted him, because that's who he is. He's so smart. And
It seems like the coaches are maybe looking now for subtle differences that only a veteran would really know about the NFL. Evan Brown's played against some of the toughest defensive players in the NFL. He's got 2 seasons of that. He's started 30 games over the last 2 seasons at 2 different positions. Now, he may be average or looked upon as league average at those spots, but nonetheless, that experience at this level gives him an edge that you just can't overcome sometimes as a rookie. It's going to take a lot. To me, it would take a lot for Oluwatimi to come in and do it. And it seems like he's capable. It seems like he's there. And it's just, I don't know. I mean, it seems like he could go either way right now. But at this stage in camp where he's sharing first team reps at this level, alternating like that, it seems like it's just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. And so far, Haynes has the job at right guard. Bradford isn't getting any first team reps, which is kind of expected. That's typically how these things go. That's why the Oluwatimi getting reps with the first team this early was notable. But part of it, like some of the stuff that I read from Haynes, is he is like, even though we feel like, oh, he hasn't really done much. He like has half a season where he's played a lot. He's been around the team. This is his 5th year. He missed 2 years because of injury. Couldn't get on the field year 3 because, well, the depth chart just was what it was, and people didn't get hurt. And then he finally got some snaps at the end of the year, and then last year was in that platoon role. But he's still been around the team. He's been around the coaches. He's been around, what is expected. So he's kind of come in as a leader and has been. I mean, he's like, of the guys in the offensive line room, other than Evan Brown, who's new to the team and whatever, he's the vet of the group. He's the guy who's been in Seattle the longest, and so he has kind of adopted that. That role of, being the vet, being the mentor, trying to teach, trying to show guys how it's done, and specifically brought up Anthony Bradford, which is interesting because that's the guy that's shooting for his job, and how he's been trying to help the kid and work with them and show him some of the things that he wished that he had known, as a rookie, and talk to him about the things that he credits to why he's healthy now and wasn't his first 2 years, which is things like diet and flexibility and not the big muscles, but the stabilization muscles and the little ones that you need. And those were the ones that he got hurt when he was injured. So just trying to teach the kids that kind of stuff that he's picked up along the way. And I just found that to be really interesting.
I will say this. It seems like there's a subtle difference between the battle at center and battle at right guard. It seems like this is Phil Haynes' job to lose. Like going into camp, it's Phil's job to lose, and he's the guy, and it's going to be an uphill battle for Bradford. Whereas on the other side, it seems like it's Oluwatimi's job to lose, but they're not going to give it to him. So it's like just a little subtle difference, but it seems like Oluwatimi's a notch ahead in this battle, and we're going to see at least one of these rookies start the year, and it seems like it's going to be Oluwatimi. But you know what? It's a long camp, 3 preseason games to go.
Yep.
We'll see what happens. All right, let's get to the defense, Keith. One player that stands out to me more than any other player right now is because of the leap in improvement. And I'm gonna call out Vi Jones at linebacker. I think he's improved his stock more than any other player so far. Added 10 pounds of muscle in the offseason. He had an interception the other day that showed his ability to get sideline to sideline, the range
Kid's got some speed.
that player, and his diversity now. He played a little bit out of position last year because he was lighter, but now coming in playing off the ball linebacker, he's still got that experience, and that's only going to help him. I think he's got a legit chance if Bush falters a little bit. Not Reggie Bush, I'm sorry. Devin Bush falters a little bit. I think that Vi Jones actually has an opportunity to start against or with Bobby Wagner on this defense. And that's great news that somebody's emerged at that spot internally because, as you know, it seems like we've been lacking there for quite a while.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically, I mean, it's Bobby and the team waiting for Jordan Brooks to get healthy, and he's not healthy. And I know there's still optimism that he might be healthy by week 1, but I still think that's crazy. And Vi Jones didn't make the roster out of camp last year, and I was really surprised at that. He had a great camp last year. Now
he did have a great camp.
He was undersized, and there was those kind of things, and I get.
And I think that's why they felt like they could stash him.
Yeah,
because he wasn't ready to play for any team.
And they did stash him, but then he has shown that he is a guy who can be a playmaker. I will see what happens when the games start, because you have guys like him that show up in practice, but then once the pads go on, it's hard to make it translate. Keem Griffin, Quill's brother, is one of those, right? He looked great in practice his rookie year. You're like, wow, you can't keep this guy off the field. And then the game started and he was out there and he was lost.
He played his first game and that was the end of his career.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he stuck around on the team, but it was as a special teams guy only.
Right.
Was never thought of as a linebacker after one game. So, yeah, I mean, it really kind of comes down to that sort of thing. And so we'll see, but what we're seeing so far, he looks good. Like, that's a nice development.
It is a nice, yeah, exactly. I think one of the best developments on the defense. Of course, you can go to the defensive back room right now. We can talk about that for hours because it's crazy. But I want to talk about Jaron Reed for a minute. Guy comes in, we kind of assumed that he was going to go into that defensive end 3-tech role on this defense, this 3-4 defense. Seems like, Pete hinted that he might see some rotation time on the inside, but so far he's been playing full-time at nose tackle for this defense at camp, looking really good, moving really well, penetrating the pocket, leading by example, all that good stuff. Attributes we gave to kind of Diggs and Wagner last week in the last show. Jaron Reed's kind of in that role too, quick to bring the other guys along, share some secrets, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of want to point that out. The other guy I want to talk about, Keith, is Mike Jackson. How can you not talk about the job that Michael Jackson's doing?
He is continuing to grind and continuing to work, and that's just fascinating. I love this. I love this story. And just going through,
and emerged in the off-season program.
Yeah,
and it continues to through 3 practices.
And he is out there intentionally lining himself up against DK Metcalf at every opportunity.
And they're having battles. And this is made for TV stuff.
And Jackson's gotten beat a couple times, and when he does, you hear him just scream that expletive because he's so angry at himself, and he just runs back, lines up, and let's go again.
I've heard he's winning more battles than he's losing against
Metcalf. Yeah, no, that is the case. But when he loses one Like he's like, no, this isn't, we're going to do this again. Let's go line up and do it again. He's just fighting in every,
And you know how DK Metcalf is against
oh,
premium competition and
he's a
physical cornerbacks.
competitor. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a competitor too. He's not going to give up anything.
Yeah. It's going to be one of those shows, I think, all through camp. Eventually we're not going to hear about them anymore because they're kind of take that competition away and make sure that DK enters the season ready to go without any nicks, cuts, scrapes, bruises. Michael Jackson's a warrior. I mean, and he's fighting. The greatest thing about this story, Keith, is the fight that Michael Jackson's coming in. He drafted a kid, by all accounts, the best cornerback in the draft to take his job. With
Tariq
Woolen over there on the other side has got his job. Emerges one of the best corners in the game last year. He's not going anywhere. It's Mike Jackson's job that they're going after with Witherspoon, and so much so that Mike Jackson says, "Bullshit. I'm not going to put up with that. I'm coming in. I'm going to show these guys I belong. I've waited too long for this opportunity. I'm not giving this thing away." So much so that they've got Witherspoon playing in the nickel full time against Kobe Bryant in camp to see who emerges there. And I think part of that is teaching Witherspoon that position so that he can be multidimensional as far as how they use him. Nonetheless, Michael Jackson's going to be on the field this year for the Seahawks.
Oh, he is, absolutely. And
he was one of those guys, Keith, when we were doing free agency and we were going through who they should retain and whatnot. Michael Jackson was on the bubble for me. I was like, yeah, they can improve there. There's an opportunity there for improvement. Yeah, he's great physical corner. He tackles really well. Pete Carroll likes that. But on the back end, he's kind of okay. He's average. He's taking it to another level this offseason.
Yeah, I always thought you undersold him a little bit. I mean, yes, there was an opportunity to upgrade because anyone who's not, an elite player, there's an
team
opportunity.
Felt that way too. It was an opportunity cost at the 5th pick overall, but they drafted Witherspoon. They could have gone in a different direction, but they decided maybe, hey, yeah, we'll upgrade that.
Mm-hmm. Player over position.
Right.
So.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to do is talk about some players that we're going to look for this week, coming into the second week of training camp, who needs to kind of show who we want to look at and gain a little bit more knowledge about. One of those is Devin Witherspoon. We just talked about him. He's only had one practice. Didn't hear a lot about his play from Friday's practice. He's a guy that now I'm going to be looking at. Where's he taking his snaps? How's he doing? How's that competition between Kobe Bryant? Kobe's not going to want to give his spot away. He's looking at how Michael Jackson's approaching his battle over there at cornerback on the left side of the defense. How's Kobe Bryant going to handle that as well? So I'm going to be looking at those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that Kobe Bryant's like the name you're not hearing much about, in that it's Trey Brown who has gotten the starters reps with Tariq Woolen out on that other, opposite of Jackson. And I found that to be interesting. They left him over there. And as, Witherspoon comes in his first practice, he's off, out of that holdout. Nope. Sorry, kid. It's still Brown over there. They're not going to give Witherspoon anything. Just sit right from the beginning. Here, you got to go earn this. And yeah, I just think it's exciting.
One last player I want to talk about on the defensive side is Mike Morris. He was drafted by Seattle, comes in at 6'6", nearly 300 pounds. By all accounts, and of course, when we go look at him too, he's a fluid mover. He doesn't look that size when you look at him, but he's just bigger and faster and just has more about him as a football player than some of the other players that are on the field. He just kind of stands out. And so I want to see what that's about with him, how the team has transitioned him from being mostly on the outside for Michigan last year and having him move a little inside to the 3-tech spot, knowing that he's got somebody on his outside edge, an outside linebacker, edge rusher on this team, and see how he handles that. See if he can affect the pass rush, beat his man one-on-one in some one-on-one battles, and see if he can emerge as maybe a quality rotation piece for this defense. I think he would really help, especially against the run.
Oh, absolutely. He is an interesting guy because he, um, you know, the way that he kind of played out of position at Michigan, um, and then he cut a bunch of weight before the combine because he wanted to look.
He knew he
Um,
wasn't super athletic.
he wanted to look leaner. He wanted to look quicker. Wanted to show that he could, because for in his mind he's like, oh, I'm a 5 tech defensive end, um, and I want to show that I can rush the passer and prove some value. And the Seahawks drafted him and said, nope, put the weight back on. We want you back where you were at
They even
college.
told him that before
Yeah.
he was drafted. Yeah.
They're like, go put the weight back on. We want you back up to what your playing weight was in college. And because we're going to use you as still at 5 tech, but now you're in a 3-4. You're not the outside guy. There's guys outside of you. And so we need you to have that ability to hold up there. And he did, and all of that. It's just, he's an interesting case. He didn't test great, but his tape is much better than his testing.
Yeah. So on the offensive side, one of the first player I want to look at, well, there's two, and there's three, and they're all wide receivers for me. I want to keep seeing Njigba, not because I now don't think that he can do it, and I want to see if it was just an aberration on the first 3 days of practice. No, I want to see it because it seems like it's so outstanding that I want to actually witness it with my own eyes and get even more excited because by all accounts, this guy's the real deal, and so I'm not worried now that he's not the real deal. I think he is. I just want to see it. And then Eskridge and Derek Young. Now, the reason I mentioned Derek Young is that we haven't heard too much about him in camp so far. I understand that he's taken a few handoffs. They've used him, around both at running back, inside at kind of tight end, like an H-back, and then on the outside as well. And I just want to see kind of how they integrate him, especially with Eskridge maybe taking that fourth spot. That competition seems real interesting to me.
He hasn't been having like the big impact, the big wow plays that, but you look at how much they moved him around and they've lined him up in the backfield in an H-back kind of fullback spot and run him out of there. They've handed the ball to him. They've run a lot of screen pass drills, way more than you've ever seen them run before. And they set up a few of those to him. They set up a couple where they faked it to him.
Lead
and then
blocker.
set up the screen on the backside away from where he went. I mean,
to Njigba, by the way.
Yeah, they seem to have developed a chunk of the playbook around Derek Young's skill set.
Yes.
As if this isn't a battle for him. They know he's on the roster, and it's like, okay, this guy's super unique. How can we use him? Because, like I said, there's so much that they're doing that other guys on the roster aren't going to be asked to do. They're just saying, here, we want you to be the one who moves around and does all these things and puts pressure on defenses. And I found that part to be interesting. Okay, he's not, like I said, he's not showing up with the wow plays. He's not like, coming in and dominating the way Smith and Jigma has. But still, the fact that they've been using him in all those different ways is very interesting.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. You had already mentioned Phil Haynes and the Anthony Bradford battle. So I'm not going to talk about that. We all want to kind of see that. I want to see Oluwatimi only because I want to see if this is the week he takes that job and keeps it. And if he doesn't, I'll probably mention him for next week because
at some point he's going to, right?
It seems like it, right? And I just kind of want to see how that evolves. So that's very interesting to me. I like things like that. Watching things like that is fascinating. If it's early, I think it shows a certain level of confidence that they have in the player. Therefore, I'm going to have more confidence in the player as we get towards the regular season kickoff. So I'm interested in that. The last one I want to talk about, Keith, is running back. We mentioned Kenny McIntosh earlier and a little bit of DJ Dallas. How about Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet?
See, that's the issue. Is like, we know Ken Walker's coming in and he's the number one on the depth chart and all of that. but he's missed the last 2 days of practice and has spent
And
time
without word of what that's for.
Yeah, because Pete Carroll didn't give a press conference after either of them, so we haven't heard what that is. But he had one light practice the first day with no pads and no hitting and any of that, and then had to sit out 2 days, and that can't be good.
Injury or discipline, that's it.
Yeah.
Or they're resting him, which, may make sense, but it's so early in camp.
It's too early in camp. If you're going to rest him, you're not resting him on day 2 and
especially
day 3.
when you've got a day off on Saturday.
Yeah. And so we need to see him back in the, back in the fold. We need to see him back doing his thing. And
first team reps.
Yeah. Charbonnet also missed practiced on Friday. So those are the two guys. So much of this offense is going to key on those two guys' ability to occupy linebackers. Them being themselves is part of why you and I are so excited about this offense and think it can be great. We need both those guys to get in there and play, not be sitting on the sideline.
Yeah. So yeah, fun. Cool. I think that's all we've got. I mean, we kind of packed a lot into the show, and I didn't know it was going to be so inclusive of a lot of different players, but it's all good so far. No injuries to report on, no setbacks, no. There's also no news on like Jamal Adams and Jordan Brooks. Things are pretty quiet there, so I would imagine it's going to be even into the following week before we might see some Jamal Adams news. I think it would start slow if he did come in to practice. It would be more of running on the sidelines, which he's doing, and working out in the in the weight room. But as soon as he kind of takes the field and does some drills inside a team structure, that's what we're looking for. And I haven't heard a single thing about that happening at this point, but it's something to watch.
Yep. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
All right. Good show, Keith. Thank you. Listeners, if you want to watch us on YouTube, go to our own YouTube channel. If you're already watching, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well, share it, and leave a review for us. You can also comment. I try to answer most of the comments that are out there, unless they're specifically directed to Keith, and usually those are the bad ones. I like to leave those alone anyway. But so I wait for Keith to come along. Sometimes I screenshot them and send them to Keith just to make sure he has an opportunity to answer back some of the derogatory comments that are associated with him. No, I'm just kidding. And then if you want to listen on the podcast side, we've got our podcast on almost any platform you can think of. Just go search Seahawks Playbook Podcast. You'll find it. When you do, hit the subscribe button. All right, let's get out of here. Talk to you later, man. Yeah, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.